Hello everyone. What we will talk today is all about organic compounds. Organic compounds are those that refers to chemical compounds in which one or more atoms of carbon are covalently linked to atoms of other elements such as hydrogen. During 1800s, German chemists learned how to do this in the lab, showing that organic compounds can be created by non-organic means. Today, organic compounds are those that contain carbon except the carbon dioxide and diamonds. Organic compound is also called as the macromolecule because it is a large molecule that make up the living things. It is a large chain of smaller molecules means giant molecules. As I said earlier, organic compounds are those that contain carbon. And these giant molecules are contained by our body, so it is called as the backbone of life. So the question is, why is carbon considered as the backbone of life? And why is it special? This is because the carbon has 4 electrons in its outer shell. This is to satisfy the octet rule. Carbon needs to share 4 valence electrons to become stable. So in relevance to this, it is the most element which combine with other elements that comprises life. Since carbon has 4 valence electrons, this means that each carbon atom forms 4 bonds. We have 3 types of carbon molecules: the straight chain, ring, and the branch chain. As you can see from the pictures, each of the type of carbon molecules are called according to their structures. The straight chain has a straight shape, while the ring has a formation of circle by carbon atoms, and the branch chain is like a straight chain that can have branches on either parts. Organic compounds have 2 classifications. The first is what we call monomer. It is a smaller subunits which serves as the base unit. All macroorganic molecules is made up of monomers. It can be different or identical. Just like what we can see in the picture, it is an example of identical monomer because they have the same structure. The second classification of organic compound is the polymers. A polymer is a combination of 2 or more monomers which are repeating. Just like, for example, the ethylene. Once 2 or more ethylene combine, it will form a what we call polyethylene, which is an example of polymer. The explanation on how these monomers combine and form polymer is what we call condensation reaction, or a process of removal of water to connect the monomers. Now let's talk about the 4 main groups of organic compounds. First, we have carbohydrates. It is a group of organic compounds occurring in foods and living tissues, such as sugars, starch, and cellulose. And it contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The ratio is 1:1, meaning carbohydrates has 1 carbon atom, 2 hydrogen atoms, and 1 oxygen atom. Carbohydrate is a main source of energy and is used by plants and some animals for its structural purposes. Carbohydrates have 3 classifications. The first is the monosaccharide. It is a monomer and refers to any class of sugar that cannot be hydrolyzed to give a simpler sugar. Example of monosaccharides are glucose, which can found in plants and more efficiently in their leaves. They produce it during photosynthesis. Another example of monosaccharide is the galactose. Galactose are those that can found in milks and other dairy products such as yogurt, Yakult, or Delight. And lastly is the fructose. From the word fructose, this type of monosaccharide can found in fruits, which make the fruits sweeter. The second classification of carbohydrates is the disaccharides. This is a two-monomer of monosaccharides. Means it contains two sugar units, and the common example of disaccharide is the table sugar, which we are using to make the coffee sweeter. And the last classification of carbohydrate is the polysaccharide. It is a long chain of monosaccharide joined together, means it contains many sugar units. We have an example of glycogen, which serves as the storage of energy in animals and humans. Second is the starch, which serves as the storage of energy in plants. And lastly is the cellulose. The function of this is to prevent water loss in plants. So the reason why we become fat as we eat more carbohydrates based from our discussion is because they contain higher level of sugars. The second group of organic compound is lipid, or the organic molecules which are not soluble in water. It contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The function of lipids is to store energy for long term and for waterproof covering. We have four main categories of lipids. Those are the fats, oils, waxes, and steroids. Fats refers to store fats in animals that we are consuming or a fat that contains by our body. The oil are those that produced by plants and animal fats which we are using to cook or to fried foods. While waxes are contained by plants which help them to prevent dehydration. And lastly, the steroids, refers to a cholesterol. We have two types of lipids, the saturated and the unsaturated. In saturated, all the carbon bonds are taken, and these become solids at room temperature and is bad for health. Saturated fat is bad for health since they remain solid in structure, meaning they have the tendency to clog in arteries that can cause hypertension or in worst can cause heart attack. While the unsaturated contain at least one double bond with the carbon and is liquid at room temperature and are better for health because it helps our body to prevent dehydration or water loss. Third is the protein. It is a large group of nitrogen-containing organic compounds that are essential part of cell. Proteins consist of polymers of amino acid and significant in diet of animals for growth and for repair of tissues. Protein contains nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. The protein has the following functions. First is the rate of cell processes. Second is to control substances in and out of the cell. And lastly, to fight disease. Examples of protein are hemoglobin in blood. Hemoglobin serves as the carrier of red blood cells in all parts of the body. The second is the collagen, which is responsible for growth of some body parts such as the hair and nails. Thirdly is the enzyme, which serves as the catalyst for chemical reaction. And lastly, the insulin, which balance the level of sugar in our body. Proteins are made up of monomers of amino acids that held together by peptide bonds. The amino acid have three parts: the amino group, carboxyl group, and the R group. The amino group contains two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of nitrogen, while the carboxyl group contains carbon, phosphorus, oxygen, and hydrogen, while the R group is a monomer combined in a chain and have a carbon which serves as the central atom. Once two or more amino acids combine, it will form a long chain or what we call the polypeptides. A polypeptide is a single linear chain of many amino acids held together by peptide bonds or amide bonds. The last group of organic compound is the nucleic acid, which contains hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and phosphorus. Nucleic acid is composed of nucleotide chain that is vital constituent of all living organisms. Nucleotides have three parts. The first is the phosphate. The second is the sugar, which is called as deoxyribosugar in DNA and ribosugar in RNA. Then thirdly is the nitrogen bases such as the adenine, the thymine, the cytosine, and guanine. Nucleic acid has a function of carrying genetic material and codes to make proteins. The example of nucleic acid are the DNA or the deoxyribonucleic acid. This is a double-stranded structure which contains codes to make proteins and carry genetic codes or the genes or the characteristic of all living organisms. And the other one is the RNA or the ribonucleic acid, which is a single-stranded. The function of it is to make proteins from the code of DNA carries. So therefore, based from our discussion, all organic compounds such as carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acid are very essential to us because they constitute all the biological system.